You're listening to the Touch 'em Up podcast. I'm your host, Double M, and on today's episode, we have UFC 311, Makhachev versus Tsarukyan 2, preview, predictions, and breakdown, taking place this upcoming Saturday, January 18th, from California, I believe. It might be moving over to Vegas from the Intuit Dome because of all the fires right now, so we don't really know where it's taking place at the current moment, but I think it's going to stay at the Intuit Arena. But we have the main event, the rematch, this time for lightweight gold between the champion in Islam, Makhachev, taking on Arman Tsarukyan. Tsarukyan's only other loss in the UFC aside from Makhachev in his UFC debut was to Mateusz Gamrot. Makhachev coming off that fifth-round Darce choke submission at UFC 302 over Dustin the Diamond Poirier. Then, in the co-main event of the evening, you have a very intriguing matchup for 135-pound gold between the champion in the machine, Merab Dvalishvili, taking on Umar Nurmagomedov for the Bantamweight Championship of the world. A very high-level, very high-skilled matchup. Could play out a little bit boring, but I think fans will get their money's worth between the co-main and the main event. So without any further ado, let's get this started and step into the ring. So before we move into the picks for this week, let's just do a little recap of this past weekend's event. Very successful in terms of overall picks. Went 11 out of 14 in total. Only ones we missed were Euros Medic, which is something I definitely said was possible because I thought that fight would end by KO. We were correct. It only took under a minute for the fight to end, with Punahele landing that big overhand left into the counter right, or into the sweeping right hook, and then dropping Euros Medic. And then we missed on Trey Ogden, which he won the first round unanimously. So I thought we were in a really good spot because I was just a little worried about how the fight was going to start off. And then those calf kicks dropped him in the second round, pretty much cost him the entire round. And then he made the mistake of trying to take the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belts back and getting shaken off and then held down for the remainder of the round. I really believe if Ogden didn't take the back of Moises, he might have won that fight. You know, he was in the position to be able to win that, and, you know, it just didn't go his way. We missed the main event with Amanda Ribas. Thought that she was going to be able to defend the takedowns, thought that she was going to be able to piece up Dern on the feet, but Dern's wrestling looked a little better in this fight than other fights, and Ribas got submitted with the only thing you really have to watch out for besides a big looping overhand from Mackenzie Dern in an armbar. So yeah, I wasn't too happy about that, but did call the Ponzinibbio KO. Didn't start off the way we wanted it, but it went the way that it did. We called the Bunes submission. We called the, what was it? We called the Fatima Klein TKO. We called the Roman Kopylov head kick KO. You know, even though it was 1 second left in the fight, my buddy Angelo, who I did have on this podcast, but I wasn't able to upload it because there was some audio issues, he ended up hitting like 2 parlays, $5 each for like over almost $4,000. Crazy. Crazy parlays there. I ended up profiting over $500, I think, around there. So good way to kick off the year, especially coming off the future champions bets on Topuria and Duplessis. And the work doesn't stop. I watched a lot of tape again on this card, which is something I mentioned for last week, and it seemed to work out pretty well. Again, we watched a lot of tape for this card in UFC 311. So let's kick it off with the first fight up on the card. The first fight up is in the flyweight division between Tagir Ulanbekov taking on Clayton Carpenter. Carpenter undefeated at 8-0. Tagir Ulanbekov is 16-2. Carpenter is coming off of that rear naked choke submission over Lucas Hocha, and Tagir Ulanbekov is coming off of that submission victory over Cody Durden, where he was able to take his back and went for the submission a bunch of times. Put the hooks in, put the body triangle in, went for the submission a bunch of times, and eventually was able to lock it in. And yeah, I honestly think that the odds are off in this fight. Let's start off with that. But just going off the technical perspectives of this fight, I think the much cleaner fighter is Ulanbekov. I think he's cleaner, on the feet. I think he's obviously going to have the reach advantage. He's going to be using his reach, using his length, sticking out the jab. He has a good 1-2, and the right hand of Ulanbekov is probably his sneakiest weapon in terms of his striking on the feet. He will throw some body kicks. He will throw some kicks to the head, but it's kind of a jab and a 1-2 approach from Ulanbekov, and I do not think that Carpenter has the cleanest striking defense. So I wouldn't be surprised if Carpenter, coming forward, using that forward pressure, trying to close the distance with his strikes, I wouldn't be surprised if he, ran into a right hand and got dropped and then maybe got put into a submission. Ulanbekov will go for those guillotines. He will look to take your back. He'll look to put that body triangle in. And whether you're on the ground and he's breaking your posture or you're standing up and he's holding that body triangle, which does tire out your legs, he's going to be attacking the neck. He'll switch sides from left to right, and he's very good at hiding the hand. But one thing I will say about Clayton Carpenter, the quintessential, every high school jock from every movie you watched is Clayton Carpenter. Every bully that knew how to fight in every movie is pretty much Clayton Carpenter. But do not let that fool you, man. This kid is a dog. Not just in the literal sense of the word, because he's coming into this fight as over a 2-1 underdog. But he comes forward and he looks to fight. He's going to get in the face of Ulanbekov. He's going to look to push him back. He's going to make Ulanbekov shoot takedowns that he probably doesn't want to shoot. And I like the activity from Carpenter off of his back as well, and he doesn't really surrender a ton of positions, man. Like, even if he ends up on his back, he'll go for triangles. He'll throw up arm bars. There's even points where he ended up on his back, and he grabbed a body lock against Edgar Chairez on the Contender Series and used it to stand back up and push Chairez against the fence. So this kid is always looking to be in the driver's seat. He does not want to surrender position. He does not want to give up positions. This kid is going to fight for your money from the time the clock starts at 4:59 to the time the clock ends at 0 seconds of round 3. Will he get hit? Yes. I think the cleaner striker, like I said, is Ulanbekov. But I also think Ulanbekov can be pressured. Ulanbekov can be pushed back. And Ulanbekov, even though he has a decent 1-2, he doesn't really like the pressure. And you know what it is? It's a lot of these Dagestani guys and, Caucasus Mountain guys. They don't like the pressure. They like to be the hammer. They do not like to be the nail. And there are some guys who can be the nail and come back from it, like a Chimaev, but there's a lot of these guys, especially who haven't fought the top of the heap in the UFC, where once they start to fall off, they will be pushed back. They will start to break, and they will, surrender positions that they didn't earlier. We've seen Ulanbekov lose in the UFC to a guy like Tim Elliott, who, yes, is a very awkward fighter, but he's very heavy on the pressure. He's very heavy on the forward foot. He's not afraid to get into scrambles and wrestle his ass off, and I kind of see a similar situation with Clayton Carpenter. I think Carpenter hits a little bit harder than Tim Elliott. I think Elliott's striking, even though it's a little bit more awkward, it's kind of harder to read. But Carpenter will get in your face. He'll throw 1-2s. He'll throw up elbows. He'll throw knees up the middle. And he will go for takedowns. And if he gets you on the ground, he's not going to, just stay there and not work for positions or submissions. He's going to slide from half guard to the full mount. He's going to leg lace you. He's going to look for elbows. He's going to look for hammer fists. He is going to beat your ass on the ground, and he's going to look for you to give up a position and eventually look to choke you out. I think that Carpenter is more than capable of scrambling and wrestling with Ulanbekov, and even though I said I think Ulanbekov has the cleaner striking, I think that the forward pressure of Carpenter might draw out shots that Ulanbekov doesn't want to throw, and it's going to get Ulanbekov on the back foot and make him tired the longer that the fight goes. And, I could see Ulanbekov cracking Carpenter, coming forward, dropping him and locking up a sub. I could see him, dropping him, coming forward with a right hand and maybe knocking him out. But if this fight goes to a decision, I am much, much more confident that Carpenter would win this fight on the scorecards than Ulanbekov. I like his pressure. I like his combinations. This kid has a lot of activity. This kid has great jiu-jitsu. Really, really high-level jiu-jitsu. And I know people are going to say, oh, well, how do you know if it's high level? He hasn't really fought the best guys in the UFC. He gets hit a lot. This guy's jiu-jitsu is high level. His grappling is legit. And Ulanbekov is a great grappler as well. He's, like I said, that reach and distance is going to be hard to get past, but you want a guy like Carpenter who doesn't care, who's going to get on that front foot, who's going to get in your face, and who's just going to walk forward like he's much better than you. And yes, it can get him caught. Yes, it can get him hurt. But at the same time, I think Carpenter has the perfect style to slow down and maybe finish Ulanbekov late. But if it's not a second or third round submission, probably a rear naked choke, I'm going to go with the fact that I think Carpenter wins this fight by decision. I think he slows down Ulanbekov. I think he breaks him. And I think he wins more scrambles the longer that this fight goes. I think it's going to be a tough 5 to 7 minutes. And I think after that, that's where Carpenter's forward pressure, that's where the takedowns, that's where the scrambling ability, that's where the submission attempts, and that's where that just aggression and meanness can slow down a guy like Ulanbekov, who we've seen get pushed back. And we've seen that he doesn't like to really be on the back foot, and he can also give up takedowns the later that fights go if you're willing to get in his face. So I think this screams Clayton Carpenter to me, and I'm going to go with the underdog. I'm going to go with the plus 200 underdog to kick the card off. Give me Clayton Carpenter. Give me a third round rear naked choke submission. This guy's rear naked chokes are nasty. Give me a third round rear naked choke. Could be an arm triangle from the mount. But I could also see it going to decision, so I think money line's the best way to play it. But give me Clayton Carpenter, third round rear naked choke submission over Tagir Ulanbekov. All right, up next is a battle in the bantamweight division between Ricky Turcios taking on Bernardo Sopaj. This fight was a fight that was originally set to take place at one of the UFC Vegas events around 2 months ago, somewhere like that, and then Turcios fell ill. I believe it was Turcios who fell ill, and the fight was canceled. Bernardo Sopaj is a big favorite. He's coming off that vicious knockout loss against Vinicius Oliveira. But you see what Oliveira's done since then. He beat Ricky Simón, who, yes, has, kind of fallen on hard times recently in his UFC career, but he's only lost to Mario Batista, who's coming off a win over Jose Aldo, and Vinicius Oliveira, So really think of it like that. I don't think that loss looks that bad in a fight where Sopaj could have arguably been up 2-0. Definitely won the first round, almost submitted Vinicius Oliveira. Very good at cutting off the cage, good combinations, punctuates his combinations with high kicks, really solid takedowns, an aggressive wrestling approach, and he will look to take your back, put the hooks in, and land ground and pound and look to submit you. And I think he's just much too aggressive for a guy like Ricky Turcios. Turcios is a very good scrambler. I do believe that Turcios probably has the better cardio the later that the fight goes. But I think that Sopaj will have worked on his cardio since that last loss to Vinicius Oliveira in his UFC debut. That was actually a spot where I backed Sopaj as the big underdog, and it looked really good out the gate. Looked like he was going to either ground and pound him to a finish or get that rear naked choke, but he just emptied the tank a little bit too early. And going up against a guy like Turcios, Turcios has decent kicks, really good scrambler, not an easy guy to take down, not an easy guy to control, but he can get out scrambled, and I think Sopaj is more than capable of out scrambling a guy like Turcios. And I think on the feet, the better technical striker, the more powerful striker, and the striker with just overall better technique and finishing ability is Bernardo Sopaj. He's a huge favorite, and I get it. I wouldn't make him like a 4-1 favorite, but I understand why he is the favorite, because Turcios, he, like I said, he's a good scrambler. If he gets Sopaj tired, midpoint of the second round going forward, maybe he can start to get in his face. Maybe he'll start to get his own takedowns. Maybe he'll start to win more scrambles, and he could get a submission. But I think Bernardo Sopaj is going to come into this fight and finish Ricky Turcios. And I'm very confident in it. I think it could be a KO. It could be a submission. I think it's an inside the distance play on Bernardo Sopaj. I think he's the cleaner striker. I think he's the more powerful striker. I think he's the more talented grappler. I think he can compete with Turcios, and I think he has more ability or the higher likelihood to finish the fight on the ground, whether it's with ground and pound or just taking your back and getting a sub. I think Sopaj comes in, beats up Turcios, and finishes him in round 2. I'm going to go with Bernardo Sopaj to get the job done via a second round rear naked choke submission. Like I said, it could be ground and pound. He could knock him out on the feet. He has enough power to do so. But I think Bernardo Sopaj is a solid prospect to look out for And even though he got knocked out viciously with that flying knee from Oliveira, you got to look at the fact that Oliveira was like a plus 2,200 going into that third round or right before the end of the second round. He was getting dominated when Bernardo was the one who came into the fight as the underdog. Bernardo trains with Andreas Michael. He trains with, Hamzat Chimaev and I believe Felipe Lima trains out there as well. So this guy's legit, and look at how good Felipe Lima is. If Felipe Lima doesn't train with Andreas Michael, then, you can correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but I believe these two may train together. Again, like I said, if I'm wrong, you can correct me. But either way, I think this is a Sopaj finish, and I think it's a dominant finish, and I think he makes a statement here. I've never been too high on Turcios. He's tough. He's got really good jiu-jitsu, but I think he's outgunned here in terms of being a full-on, well-rounded mixed martial artist. So give me Bernardo Sopaj to win this fight via a second round. I know I said submission earlier. I'm going to go with the sub. I think he'll give up his neck and get choked out after getting beat up with some ground and pound. So give me Bernardo Sopaj to get a second round rear naked choke submission over Ricky Turcios in this spot. I think he finishes him. I think he looks good doing it. And yeah, I like Sopaj a lot here. Next fight up is in the bantamweight division between the phenom grappler in Rinya Nakamura taking on the well-rounded and tough Muin Gafurov. I believe that's how you say his last name. Again, if I'm wrong, correct me. I know one guy out there who's looking for my pronunciation. But, yeah, looking at this fight, I don't think there's a lot to say. I think Gafurov is a solid striker. Decent combinations. He can throw some spinning kicks. And he doesn't stop fighting. He will try to win the fight for as much as he can, or as long as he can. But to be honest, he gives up a lot of positions on the ground. He gives up a lot of takedowns. He gives up a lot of top control time. And doing that against a guy like Rinya Nakamura, who has looked really good, but in some fights just can't get the finish. I think this is a fight where he probably gets a finish, but I wouldn't tell you to go bet on it because I think everybody expected a finish in his last two fights, and he didn't get it. On the road to UFC, he got that knockout early against Toshiomi Kazama, but, Kazama has pretty much been a punching bag in every fight. Even his last fight that he won, he was getting beat up by Charlampos Gregorio, getting pieced up, getting dropped, getting rocked, and then Gregorio got tired, gave up a takedown, and got submitted when he should have finished Kazama like a long time before that. But don't get me started. So, Nakamura is solid, and I think he beats a guy like Gafurov. But if Gafurov wins, it wouldn't totally shock me. It would shock me a little bit, but I wouldn't be completely surprised if Gafurov wins. But I think he just gives up too many takedowns. He's solid on the feet, like I said, good spinning kicks, throws some good combinations. He's good on the pressure. He can wrestle himself. He can get takedowns of his own right, but he's nowhere near the level of grappling and jiu-jitsu and wrestling of Rinya Nakamura. And I think Nakamura is going to get those takedowns. I think he's going to beat him up on the ground, and I think he's going to sub him. I think Nakamura wins this fight by sub. I think he beats him up. Gafurov tries to get up, gives up his back, and gets rear naked choked. I think this is the fight where we see the Rinya Nakamura finish, like I said, that most people expected in his last couple fights. But if it gets past the midpoint of the second round into the third, maybe we see Nakamura slow down, but we've seen him go a hard 15 and just be able to take down guys, control guys, and he's solid on the feet with decent power and solid technical striking. So I think this is a Rinya Nakamura win, and I think he gets a finish over Muin Gafurov. I'm going to go with a second round rear naked choke submission. Again, man, I'm going with a lot of subs on this card. It's crazy. But I think he beats him up with ground and pound and submits him. Could be an arm triangle, but I think he takes his back and gets the rear naked choke and gets the sub. So give me a second round rear naked choke submission for Rinya Nakamura. I think he gets the finish that we expected in his last two fights. And I think it's a pretty dominant performance. But I wouldn't be surprised if Nakamura had to come through some adversity for the reasons I already mentioned. Gafurov is not a pushover. He just concedes a lot of positions and takedowns that I don't really like against a grappler of this level with Nakamura. So Rinya Nakamura, second round rear naked choke submission. I think he looks good here, looks pretty dominant. All right, next up is in the women's bantamweight division in a pretty interesting fight, I would say, especially for women's MMA between Carol Rosa taking on Ailin Perez. Pretty much striker versus grappler here, man. Perez has okay striking, but it's nowhere near the level of Karol Rosa. And Perez is the much better grappler, much better top control, much better ground and pound than Karol Rosa. So who's going to be able to get their game off? Is Perez going to be able to push forward and get those takedowns and beat up Rosa? Or is Rosa going to keep it on the feet, work her way back up to the feet if she gets taken down, and beat up Ailin Perez and probably finish her late? I am going with option 2. I am going with option KR. I'm going to go with Karol Rosa here. I think Rosa or Rosa, however you want to say it, she's much better on the feet, and this girl is a good striker. I know some people may not believe it, but she got beat up by Irene Aldana, but Aldana, is a very, very, very good boxer. Yeah, she lost to Norma Dumont, and Karol Rosa also lost to Norma Dumont. So Dumont is a killer, and I picked Irene Aldana to finish Karol Rosa, and she probably should have a bunch of times, but Rosa's tough. She got in the face of Irene Aldana. She threw some big punches. She was willing to stand and trade with her, and, Perez is nowhere near the level of striker that Irene Aldana is, but again, Perez is a better grappler. I like the fact that Rosa doesn't concede takedowns very easily, and even if she gets taken down, she is pretty active at working her way back up to the feet and not conceding positions and just staying there. I do believe if Perez gets a bunch of takedowns and controls on top, she probably wins this fight by decision. I don't think it's a finish on the side of Perez. I don't think she would submit her. She does have good ground and pound. She will work to the mount, and she will put her weight on you and beat you up, but I don't think Rosa or Rosa is going to give up enough top control time to Perez. And on the feet, Rosa's got good straight punches, good check hooks, very solid calf kicks, kind of throws them Alex Pereira-esque, where she doesn't really turn the hip over. She kind of kicks up on your calf to make it less telegraphed and hit that peroneal nerve. That does leave you open to getting countered. I wouldn't be surprised if Perez landed a big overhand and maybe rocked Karol Rosa, which gave up the takedown. But again, Karol Rosa's not easy to take down. Her stats would say like a 67-68% takedown defense, but from what I've seen in the UFC, she doesn't give up takedowns that easy, but she can be pushed against the cage and kind of held in that over-under, and I think that's what Perez is kind of going to look to do. She's going to look to beat her up, push her back, and then get her to that over-under, push her against the fence, and look to throw her with a hip toss or an inside or outside trip off the cage. And I think she'll get maybe like 1 or 2 takedowns, but I think Rosa will work her way back up to the feet. I think on the feet, it's kind of a mismatch. Like I said, I like Rosa striking, her boxing, finishing her combinations with kicks, solid, clean punches. Yeah, she leaves her head on the center line, but again, I don't think that's something she really has to worry about with Ailin Perez. And we've seen Perez slow down later on in fights, and I think Rosa's style of forward pressure, decent takedown defense, decent get-up ability, doesn't just leave, a ton of time for you to do much on the ground. She will be active and working her way back up. I think that Rosa is going to beat up Ailin Perez and break her late. I'm going to go with a third-round TKO for Karol Rosa here. I like Karol Rosa. I like Karol Rosa, like I said. If you want to correct me for how I'm pronouncing it, go ahead, but I believe it's Rosa. I like Karol Rosa. I think that she is the much cleaner striker. I like her ability to work her way back up. I like her takedown defense, and I like the fact that she's going to be much more active, much cleaner, much sharper on the feet, and I believe her to have the better cardio towards the midpoint of the second round into that third round. And I think the forward pressure, the combinations, the low kicks, she's going to have to watch out for how many kicks she throws because it could open up for the takedowns of Perez, but I think Rosa's going to be wise to it. I think Karol Rosa is going to be able to stuff those takedowns or work her way back up to the feet. And I think Rosa's going to beat up Ailin Perez. Give me Karol Rosa to find a late finish. I'm going to go with a third-round TKO up against the cage, tiring her out, ripping those body shots, slowing her down, making those takedown attempts more telegraphed, and I think she just breaks her in that third round. So give me the favorite. Give me Karol Rosa to find a third-round TKO over Ailin Perez. We went with Fatima Klein with the ground and pound TKO last week. We're going back to the well with the TKO for Karol Rosa. I think she slows down Perez, works her way back up to the feet, rips those body shots, and just puts a beating on her in the later portions of this fight when it's pretty close early on, maybe even leaning towards Perez. But yeah, Karol Rosa, third round TKO over Ailin Perez. I think she's going to beat her up pretty bad. All right, next up is a battle in the lightweight division. Pretty interesting fight here between Grant Dawson coming off that second round ground and pound TKO over Rafa Garcia, taking on Diego Ferreira, who's coming off of that prospect-killing performance over Mateusz Rebecki, who Rebecki's coming off that win over Miktabek Oralbai, by decision. And this is a tough fight, man. Diego Ferreira is a tough test for Grant Dawson. And let me just tell you right now, he's the much, much, much cleaner striker on the feet. Diego Ferreira and Grant Dawson in a kickboxing match. Diego Ferreira finishes Grant Dawson like 8 out of 10 times. And I know a lot of people are going to look at that Bobby Green fight and say, oh, well, Bobby Green knocked him out early in round 1 off that little switch stance left hand. And yeah, he did. He dropped him. He knocked him out. But you can't take that with 100% confidence going into how you analyze the future fights. That doesn't happen very often in any fight where one of the first shots finishes a fighter. Maybe that happens in 1 out of every 300 fights where the first shot is what finishes the fighter at the highest level. But sometimes you can get caught cold. I think that Diego Ferreira, yes, is the better striker. He's fought the better competition. I think he's going to have the better cardio later on. I do believe Grant Dawson to have the much better wrestling. But again, Diego Ferreira is decent with the takedown defense. He has been taken down before. He has been controlled. He got ground and pound TKO'd by Gregor Gillespie. And I think a lot of people forget about that guy because I don't know if he's still in the UFC. He might have retired. But, he did finish Diego Ferreira. But Ferreira was able to win some scrambles, was able to take the back of Gregor Gillespie, almost get a choke. And I kind of see Ferreira being able to win some scrambles against Grant Dawson. Be able to, find some ways to end up on top, work his way back up to the feet, and just be out-voluming Grant Dawson, be kind of beating him up. If this fight's on the feet for longer than a round, of prolonged striking, I think Ferreira pieces up Grant Dawson. I think he hits him way too much. I think it makes Grant Dawson's takedowns a little bit more telegraphed. Yes, I believe Dawson is a great wrestler. There's a reason why I picked him to finish Rafa Garcia in round 2. There's a reason I went about it the way that I did. And I think that Grant Dawson is going to be able to get some takedowns. He is the better wrestler, but I think the better mixed martial artist is Diego Ferreira, and he's fought really solid competition. He's fought like the best of the best. Very tough matchups. Ferreira doesn't get an easy fight in the UFC. Even the ones that he lost. I mean, Mateusz Gamrot, Mateusz Rebecki, Michael Johnson. He's not an easy fight, even though his record looks the way that it does. He's not an easy fight for anybody. And I think the competition level, the experience, the veteran experience of Diego Ferreira is going to cause him to finish Grant Dawson late or win a decision. I think that, he might lose the first round. He's going to get taken down, maybe get beat up a little bit. But I don't think Dawson is going to be able to push that pace that a Gamrot does. Be able to push that heavy pace that I guess you could say like a Gregor Gillespie, because I don't think he has the striking to go along with that grappling. And I think Ferreira is going to expect a lot of that wrestling. I think he's going to get taken down a couple times. He's going to get put in some compromising positions. But Ferreira has really good jiu-jitsu in his own right, and I think he'll be able to defend the submissions. I think Ferreira will work his way back up to the feet. I think Ferreira will land big shots. Yes, he can get tired himself, but I don't see Dawson breaking Diego Ferreira. I see Ferreira breaking Grant Dawson. And I see him outstriking him, stopping the takedowns, making the shots more telegraphed, and beating him up. I'm going to go the same route as the way that the Mateusz Rebecki fight finished. I'm going to go with a third-round TKO for Diego Ferreira. And even if he doesn't get a finish, I think Ferreira can win a decision as well. So give me Diego Ferreira. Give me the big underdog. Give me Diego Ferreira, third-round TKO over Grant Dawson. I think the striking is going to get a little bit more exposed here in this fight, and I think Diego has the grappling and get-up ability to make it a very tough fight for Dawson if he can survive past that 7-minute mark. So give me the underdog in Diego Ferreira. Give me the veteran, Diego Ferreira, to find a finish against Grant Dawson. Give me third-round TKO for Diego Ferreira here. All right, next fight up is in the heavyweight division. You've got a battle between Jailton Almeida taking on Sergei Spivac. I'm going to keep this one short because, number one, I don't really care about this fight, and I don't think this fight really matters in the grand scheme of things. Sergei Spivac is the better wrestler, and if he takes down Almeida, I think Almeida probably has a harder time getting up. But I think Almeida is much faster on the feet. I think he's much more explosive with his striking. And I think he probably can compete in the grappling with Sergei Spivac to the point where, he might end up on the top position and kind of beat up Sergei. Sergei's very good from the top, not so good from the bottom. I kind of feel like Almeida is probably a little bit better from the bottom if Sergei does get those takedowns. You don't want a guy like the polar bear in Sergei Spivac on top of you. You don't want him dropping ground and pound. You don't want him beating you up. But I think Almeida can kind of be the faster striker on the feet, be the cleaner striker, outland Sergei Spivac. And I think eventually he probably hurts Spivac with a shot on the feet, stuffs one of his takedowns, ends up in the mount, and finishes this fight with ground and pound. I wouldn't be surprised if this fight went to a decision, but I think the later it goes, it probably favors one side more than the other, to where if Spivac wins, it's probably an arm triangle or a ground and pound finish. If Almeida wins, it could be a KO on the feet. We've seen Spivac get dropped and get knocked out before, or it could be a ground and pound finish. I don't think a submission happens here. If it does happen, I think it's on the side of Jailton Almeida. But, realistically speaking, I'm going to take Almeida to win. I wouldn't bet on this fight. I wouldn't spend a whole bunch of time analyzing this fight because I do think there is an avenue where Sergei wins, but I think it's a hard avenue to get to, and I don't really think he's going to out-muscle and just bully Almeida. He could, because he is a former light heavyweight, but he's still pretty big even for the heavyweight division. So I think Almeida is going to be too quick, too crisp, too clean, too fast for Sergei Spivac, and I think he's going to land a big shot on the feet that hurts him. He's going to cause Spivac to panic wrestle, stuff the takedown, get on top, land some ground and pound from the mount, and finish off Sergei Spivac. Give me Jailton Almeida to finish Sergei Spivac via a second-round ground and pound TKO. Like I said, I think he hurts him, stuffs a shot, ends up on top, flattens him out. Could be like a back mount position, flattens him out, and ground and pounds him for the win. So give me Jailton Almeida, second-round ground and pound TKO over Sergei Spivac. But again, like I said, wouldn't 100% shock me if Sergei was able to out-wrestle and just bully Almeida, but I don't think that's going to happen. All right, and for the final prelim that we're going to break down here, it's in the bantamweight division between the UFC Dana White Contender Series contract winner, the Sean O'Malley 2.0, some are calling him, but it's Payton Talbott 1.0, and Payton Talbott taking on Raoni Barcelos. Let me get this straight here, man. Barcelos is a step up in competition for Payton Talbott, 100%. Barcelos has decent striking, decent head movement, good uppercuts, slip uppercuts, slip uppercut left hook, slip counter check hook, 1-2 slip uppercut up the middle. He will throw his combinations, and, it is a competitive fight. But I think the Barcelos of 2 or 3 years ago is a much tougher fight for Payton Talbott than the current version of Raoni Barcelos. But Barcelos did have a competitive fight with Kyler Phillips, and I think Kyler Phillips is kind of like a Payton Talbott, but I think Talbott's just different, man. I think this kid is different, mentally and, athletically. He's just a different breed. I'm not saying he's going to be a world champion, but I think this kid has the skills to have a very successful UFC career, and then that's what I'm going to leave it at. Barcelos is solid. Barcelos can wrestle. I think he has the better grappling than Talbott. If Barcelos is going to win, I think he's going to want to get in the face of Talbott, avoid the counters, change levels, push Talbott up against the cage, and use his wrestling. We saw him use his wrestling and his jiu-jitsu against Christian Quinones, where he actually got a submission. And I think using the wrestling and forward pressure and trying to tire out a guy like Payton Talbott is how Barcelos is going to win this fight. You got to push him back. You got to tire him out. Get some takedowns, try to expose the grappling of Talbott. Talbott did end up getting a submission over Nick Aguirre, who has very solid grappling in his own right, but we saw that it's not really UFC level. So this is a UFC level fighter who's fought some of the best of the best. At one point, he was compared to a young Jose Aldo with the way he moved around, light on the feet, slipping and countering, solid boxing, 1-2, slip check hook right hand, 1-2 down the middle. I like Talbott, though. I like him quite a bit, and I think he's going to knock out Raoni Barcelos in the first round. I don't think this fight makes it to round 3. If it does make it to round 3, I think Barcelos probably wins round 3 at a higher clip than Talbott does. Excuse me, sorry, I'm still a little congested, but I think Talbott, again, shows out here. Do I think it's as fast as the Yanis Gamori knockout? No. But I think Talbott is going to knock out Raoni Barcelos because Barcelos is old at this point. He's still solid. He's still a solid fighter. He still has a very well-rounded mixed martial arts game, but I just think he's a little bit too far past it at this point against a guy in Payton Talbott who's kind of the new flavor of the week for the UFC. This is their next fighter that they want to push. You can see it in the matchups. You can see it in the performances. They want Talbott to get a highlight reel KO here, and I think he does it. I'm going to go with a straight right hand down the pipe to knock out Raoni Barcelos in round 1. I think Talbott gets a big win here, and I think he goes into the top 15, maybe even gets a top 10 matchup, but I wouldn't push it that hard. I think he'll get into that top 15 and get a first-round highlight reel KO over Raoni Barcelos. I think he's going to time one of his kicks with a right hand, kind of like Yanis Gamori, and put him down and finish him off. So give me Payton Talbott to get a highlight reel KO again in round 1 over Raoni Barcelos. And yeah, I like Talbott a lot. Talbott round 1 KO, the pick here. All right, next fight up. First fight on the main card in a very interesting matchup in the middleweight division between Kevin the Trailblazer Holland taking on Reinier de Ridder, former double champion in one championship, coming off of a very impressive debut win via arm triangle submission against the submission specialist and veteran in Gerald GM3 Mearshart. I picked Reinier de Ridder as a pretty solid favorite against GM3, and the one thing I will say is his striking did not look up to par. But he did drop GM3. Right hand, left hook, dropped him. And in this fight, the much better striker is Kevin Holland. I don't care what you say. He's the much better striker. If this fight stays on the feet, Kevin Holland is going to knock out Reinier de Ridder. But Kevin Holland is a guy where he looks very good in certain matchups and very bad in others. If this fight was at 170, I feel like he would be able to handle the grappling a little bit better. Being that it's at 185, I don't think he's going to be able to handle de Ridder with his grappling, his top control, his chain wrestling, and his submissions. I really don't. Do I think that Holland might be able to, swing and lock up an armbar from the bottom? Maybe. But I think de Ridder's grappling is too high level for that. I think de Ridder knows that he can't stand and strike with Kevin Holland for that long. But I also think Kevin Holland has a fight IQ issue. Like against Michael Venom Page, he did look for takedowns and it worked good. But he mainly wanted to stand and strike, looking for shots, and wanted to try to outstrike, Michael Venom Page. Not a good idea. Even against Michael Oleksiejczuk, that's a fight where I picked Holland by sub, but he got dropped bad with a big shot. Now, Michael Oleksiejczuk hits a lot harder than Reinier de Ridder. He's a lot more dangerous, he hits a lot harder, and he does have that middleweight power, being a former light heavyweight. So you can't take that away from Holland because he got dropped, and, he found a way to win with that armbar and broke Michał Oleksiejczuk's arm. In this fight, like I said, Holland, much better striker on the feet, much longer, uses his reach much better. He could spark Reinier de Ridder out. He could knock him out easy. But I think the forward pressure and the grappling level of Reinier de Ridder, I'm just going to say it, I think it's going to be too much for Kevin Holland. We saw against Roman Dolidze, who I believe is a much stronger middleweight, but still, grappling level, I would like to see whose grappling is better between de Ridder and Dolidze, because I think it's very close. I think it's almost a coin flip at whose grappling is better. And even in that fight, Holland is the much better striker than Dolidze, has a lot of power, very long 1-2s, good jabs, and I think he's better defensively, but Roman Dolidze doesn't have the best striking either. He just has a lot of power. More power than de Ridder, but he was able to use his grappling. He was able to win those scrambles, and, Holland did pop a rib out, but I think it could be a similar situation here where Holland's landing some big shots on the feet. We've seen De Ridder get knocked out, but he got beat by a guy who is a very big guy. Huge with a lot of power. And Anatoly Malotkin, I think his name is, or let me see. I don't know the guy's name off the top of my head. He got beat by Anatoly Malotkin. Yeah, I mean, I was pretty close on the pronunciation, but Anatoly Malotkin, retirement, basically a TKO in round 3 due to exhaustion. But Anatoly is a huge guy, way bigger, way stronger than a guy like Kevin Holland. But Holland's going to be a lot faster, a lot crisper, and a lot cleaner than De Ridder on the feet. I did not like the striking I saw from De Ridder against GM3, and he will get exposed against Holland. But I think the hole in the grappling of Holland is going to be too much against a guy like Reinier De Ridder. I think De Ridder's going to get those takedowns. I think he's going to smother Holland. I think he's going to get on top. I think he's going to land some vicious ground and pound. And I think he's going to submit Kevin Holland. Holland's a guy who hasn't really been submitted, but he has always had a hole in his grappling. I think it's going to be better than it's been because he's had to work on it so much. But I think De Ridder is going to get those takedowns. He's going to chain wrestle. He's going to get those takedowns, inside or outside trips, end up in the top position. And I think he's just going to be too big for Holland once the fight hits the ground. I think he's going to land some elbows, land some hammer fists, and I think he is going to get another arm triangle submission. It could be a rear naked choke, but I think it's going to be an arm triangle. I think he's going to beat him up, land some hammer fists, and I think Holland's going to go to turn, like to explode out. He's going to lock up that arm triangle, step off, and leave that knee on the belly to kind of push those hips down and really put a lot of pressure. And I think he's going to submit Kevin Holland in round 2. So I am going to go with the Dutch Knight. I'm going to go with Reinier De Ridder to go 2-0 in the UFC, getting a second round arm triangle choke submission over Kevin Holland. Would not shock me one bit if Holland found a KO here. I think this fight doesn't go to decision. That's probably my favorite way to play it, would be fight doesn't go the distance if we're talking about picking a way to bet on the fight. But from an analysis standpoint, Holland, much better on the feet, much cleaner, much more power, could easily knock out De Ridder. De Ridder, much better grappler, much bigger than Holland, and can exploit the scenarios where Holland has had a lot of issues, especially at 185, even having issues with grappling at 170. And I think De Ridder is a world-class grappler, being able to do what he did against Gerald Meerschaert, who, yes, has been submitted, but most of the time is the better grappler in his UFC career. So, give me Reinier De Ridder. Give me Reinier De Ridder to win via a second-round arm triangle choke submission. I think he's too big and too talented of a grappler to lose to Kevin Holland. I like RDR. RDR via ARM triangle here. All right, next up is a very solid matchup in the lightweight division between Beneil Dariush taking on Renato Moicano. 25-1 for Money Moicano, 22-6-1 for Benny Dariush. I honestly think this fight is 50-50. There's no reason why anybody should be a 2-1 favorite. I think the odds are off, and I think the odds should be a pick'em. Because Renato Moicano is a great grappler. You know, good takedowns, really solid with the body lock, getting to the top position, vicious ground and pound with elbows and hammer fists, and very solid jiu-jitsu as well. You know, but I think Benny Dariush can scramble with Moicano, and I wouldn't be surprised if Beneil ended up on the top against Moicano in a few different scenarios. We've also seen Moicano get hurt in fights and then find his way back in, and that's usually by using his grappling against guys who are mainly strikers who don't have the same level of grappling. Kind of like a Benoit Saint Denis, kind of like a Drew Dober, you know, 2 of the wins on his recent win streak. And I think Benoit Saint Denis, the win was impressive. I originally wanted to go with Saint Denis, then I kind of switched to Moicano, but I ended up going with Benoit Saint Denis, thinking that the striking was just going to be too much and he was going to get dropped, hurt, and finished. Moicano's tough, man. He's got a lot of heart. But I also know that he's had issues against southpaws before. Even though it was on short notice, he had issues against Rafael Dos Anjos, who is a much smaller... Well, I know he's not smaller than Benny Dariush, but He's a much more clean striker, or a much cleaner striker, but I also think that Benny Dariush might be a little bit more explosive than Dos Anjos in certain situations. And I think Beneil is a much better grappler than Rafael Dos Anjos. Even against Drew Dober, was able to exploit the grappling, but at the same time, was landing a lot of shots, getting hit with a lot of shots from Dober, left, straight, right hook, beating him up on the feet, and then eventually, giving up the takedowns. I think Dariush can out-scramble Moicano. If you can out-scramble Mateusz Gamrot, you can out-scramble Renato Moicano. And I wouldn't be surprised if Dariush out-scrambled Moicano and wound up in the top position more than Moicano did. Now, I've picked against Moicano in his last few fights. Looked really good in certain spots until it didn't. And especially against Jailton Turner, he had him out. If he followed up with one more shot, the ref could have called it. He was pretty much out, hit the ground and woke up. The ref didn't stop it. Turner walked away and cost himself a win there. That was a Turner KO. He cost himself the win, kind of had that adrenaline dump, and that was it. And Moicano just kept coming forward wanting to win. That's the one thing about Moicano. He wants to win. The last time we saw Beneil inside the cage was when he got knocked out by Arman Tsarukyan in a fight where a lot of people expected that to go the distance. He landed a knee up the middle in the clinch, which lifted the head of Beneil Dariush, and then landed a hook on his chin and put him down and knocked him out. In the first round, might I add. So first round KO the last time we saw Beneil Dariush. But, that was against Tsarukyan. I think Tsarukyan would beat Moicano. So, weighing this fight, I think it's 50-50. I think Moicano has more motivation right now to win. But I also think Dariush is dangerous. Even though he's getting older, I think Moicano's had a lot of wars. He's taken a lot of damage. I think Moicano's also a little bit old in this scenario as well. So I wouldn't take the age into consideration. I am worried considering that Beneil is coming off of that KO loss to Tsarukyan. But, we have Tsarukyan fighting for the title in the main event. Moicano has wins over Drew Dober, wins over Jailton Turner, and win over Benoit Saint Denis. And he's looked good in a lot of those fights. Looked very solid against Saint Denis, beating him up, piecing him up, and ripping him apart on the ground. I think on top position, both fighters are in danger from the bottom. Moicano on top of Dariush, it's a lot of problems. He can land a lot of ground and pound. Maybe he could submit him. Dariush on top of Moicano, it's a lot of problems. And I think Dariush can land a lot of ground and pound and maybe even submit Renato Moicano. I think this fight is close, and I think both fighters fight at a similar level. It's pretty much a coin flip for me. It's just I would lean a little bit more towards Moicano in percentage of winning because of the fact that Dariush is coming off that KO loss and, he's getting a little bit older. But I also look at that Mateusz Gamrot fight, and I think if you can out-scramble and out-wrestle a guy like Mateusz Gamrot, whose striking is getting better, it would not surprise me if Dariush cracked Moicano, dropped him, and was able to out-scramble him enough to win this fight. I think Moicano can, potentially finish with ground and pound on the floor. I think Dariush could potentially land a big shot on Moicano and knock him out. Moicano's very chinny. He survives, but he's very chinny. I'm going to take the underdog. Give me the plus 170. I don't know if that's what the number still is, but give me Beneil Dariush. It might come back to bite me. I haven't had the most success picking Dariush, or picking against him in certain spots. But I think that this one is going to turn the tide for me. I'm going to go with Beneil Dariush. I think Moicano's been on a nice little run, but I think Dariush is just at a higher level in terms of an overall mixed martial artist than Renato Moicano. Again, yes, I worry about the durability, but Moicano doesn't hit that hard. So I don't necessarily see a situation where Moicano knocks out Dariush on the feet. And I think Dariush can hurt Moicano and knock him out on the feet. And if he hurts him and Moicano goes to wrestle, I think Dariush can scramble and stop the takedowns or end up in the top position. And that's something that Moicano hasn't really had to deal with on this recent win streak. So give me Beneil Dariush to find a second-round TKO against Renato Moicano. I think he hurts him, stops the takedown, lands some more shots, and puts him out. Moicano's been knocked out a bunch of times. So is Dariush, though. But give me Beneil Dariush second-round TKO over Renato Moicano. Wouldn't surprise me if it was like a split decision, but I think Dariush has enough power to put away Moicano. So give me the underdog. Give me Beneil Dariush to snap the winning streak of Money Moicano with a second-round TKO in this fight. All right, the next fight up, the featured bout of the evening in the light heavyweight division, is a battle between the former light heavyweight champions in Yuri Denisa Prohaska taking on Jamal Sweet Dreams Hill. I'm excited for this fight. I'm a much bigger fan of Prohaska than Jamal Hill. I think that Jamal Hill is not in a good mental space. And, skill for skill, I think Jamal Hill can knock out Yuri Prohaska 100%. He's a very solid southpaw, a very dangerous southpaw, good check right hook, very good straight left hands. He can switch stances between orthodox and southpaw. He can land a good overhand right. The head kicks and the body kicks from southpaw are very dangerous. We've seen Yuri Prohaska get dropped with a head kick against Alex Pereira, even though it was a switch kick, but I still think the head kicks of Jamal Hill could give Prohaska some trouble. Prohaska is very hittable. He was getting beat up by Alexander Rakic, and it looked like Rakic was going to either finish him or run away with a decision. Rakic got tired from the forward pressure, the forward movement, the awkward style of Jiri, and, eventually broke. And I'm going to be honest, I could see a very similar situation here with Prohaska. I think Prohaska could break Jamal Hill. And I know that people are going to say, well, look at his performance against Glover Teixeira. For Jamal Hill, he had a better performance against Glover than Prohaska did, and that's true. Prohaska was losing that entire fight and then found a way to submit Glover Teixeira, but he found a way to win. That was in a 5-rounder, not a 3-rounder. Again, Jamal Hill's performance pretty much is shut out for 5 rounds. Maybe he lost 1 round, won 4 out of the 5 at the least. But a very good performance for Jamal Hill. But again, that was a while ago. That was at UFC 283. We're at 311. Prohaska, he won against Glover Teixeira, and in this fight, it really comes down to the fact that I just don't think Jamal Hill is focused on Prohaska. I think he's focused on Alex Pereira. I think he's still focused on Alex Pereira. Do I think he's taking the fight seriously? Yes, I'm sure he's training hard. I'm sure he's getting ready for Prohaska, but I think he's looking past Prohaska towards Alex Pereira again. And there's no reason to. You have to worry about right now. You have to worry about winning impressively, beating Jiri and then maybe getting a title shot, or beating Prohaska and maybe having to fight one more time, because the fight with Pereira was not close. He landed a good body shot and then got hit with that shovel uppercut left hook and then finished with like 60 hammer fists when he was out cold and his head was just shaking back and forth like a bobblehead. It was a dominant win for Pereira, and it was a win that I expected. I didn't expect it to be that early, but I expected a KO from Pereira there. In this fight, I think Jamal Hill has the tools to win. He's a very technical southpaw. Like I said, very good body kicks, very good head kicks, very good straight left hand, a good check hook. He knows how to cut his angles and use good movement. Prohaska doesn't have the best defense. He fights with his hands in front of his face, and he could easily get hit by Jamal and put down. Jamal Hill has the opportunity to knock out Prohaska, but I think Prohaska's awkward style, that forward pressure, and the fact that Prohaska doesn't think about the next opponent. Prohaska thinks about what's in front of him right now. He's in the then, he's in the now. He's looking at Jamal Hill, he's looking through Jamal Hill. I think Jamal Hill is looking past Jiri Prohaska, and I don't think he's in the best mental space for his MMA or UFC career. If Jamal Hill wasn't still talking about Alex Pereira like the fight didn't happen, then I would maybe have a little bit different of an outlook here. But I think Prohaska is going to beat Jamal Hill because I don't think Jamal is focused on what he needs to be focused on. And I think that the awkward style, the forward pressure, I think he can break Jamal Hill. I think he can push him back. I think he can land some big shots. And I think Yuri Prohaska is going to knock out Jamal Hill. I don't know if it's going to be as vicious as the KO with Alex Pereira, but I think we're going to get a vicious knockout from Yuri Prohaska here over Jamal Hill. I just don't think Jamal Hill's head is in the right spot. And when you're not in the game mentally, I have to go with the other guy, especially when I think coming up to the fight, I think Prohaska is going to end as the underdog. He started as the underdog. I think it's a little bit even now. I think Prohaska is coming to kill, and I think Jamal Hill is coming to try to get to Alex Pereira more than trying to beat Yuri Prohaska. So the pick is Yuri Prohaska. The pick is Yuri Prohaska by a second-round knockout against Jamal Hill. I think he's going to land a vicious shot, put him down, and maybe land like 1 or 2 shots on the ground. But I think Jamal Hill is going to be caught having sweet dreams on the canvas as Prochazka gets another KO win. So give me Jiri Prochazka. Give me the Samurai. Second round knockout over Jamal Hill. All right, and now we are at the co-main event of the evening for the UFC Bantamweight Championship of the World between the champion in Merab, the Machine, Dvalishvili, coming off a dominating title win over the former champion in Sean O'Malley, taking on the undefeated at 18-0, Umar Nurmagomedov, the cousin of Khabib Nurmagomedov, coming off of a dominant decision win over Corey the Sandman Sandhagen. This is going to be an extremely high-level fight. That's one thing that you have to say, whether you're on the side of the underdog in Merab or the favorite, and the decently sized favorite in Umar Nurmagomedov. I think that this fight is going to be competitive either way you look at it. Merab is a guy where he can put a pace on people that others just can't keep up with, even at the highest level. I mean, he was outstriking Petr Yan. He was, outlanding him, taking him down. Even when he wasn't getting takedowns, he was able to control him, get him on the ground, and just put a pace that nobody has ever been able to put Petr Yan under. Nobody's ever been able to keep up with him. And it wasn't that Merab was just keeping up in the wrestling. He was keeping up on the feet. He was outstriking Petr. He was landing elbows. He was landing kicks. He was landing knees. And that was a performance that really shocked me. I wasn't super shocked by how easily he was able to out-wrestle Sean O'Malley, but I was shocked at the fact that O'Malley really had next to no offense. That's something with Merab. Aside from Marlon Moraes, aside from Ricky Simón, where he got caught in a guillotine and slammed, and then when he slammed him, he ended up in the mount and got submitted basically by Ricky Simón. Merab doesn't have close fights. He got dropped and hurt multiple times against Marlon Moraes, and that is somebody who probably was the closest to defeating him inside the cage. Henry Cejudo did a similar thing where he landed a left hook and it hurt him. 1-2, slip, boom, come back with the left hook. He slipped his jab, bang, came back with a left hook, and it was the same sequence, almost identical to the sequence that Moraes had. And there is a vulnerability to the left side of Merab Dvalishvili. Sean O'Malley in the 5th round did hurt Merab with a front kick, a little stabbing front kick to the body. So he does have vulnerabilities. We've seen him get hurt. We've seen him get rocked. We've seen him get wobbled. We've seen him get put in positions. But the problem is you just can't keep up a pace with this guy. Merab puts a championship pace on people that others just can't keep up with. He's called the Machine for a reason. Now, Umar Nurmagomedov, he is the much cleaner striker. I mean, there's not really anything to write home about. There's not anything to think about. He's the much cleaner striker. He can land beautiful kicks from the rear side or the lead side. He switches stances between orthodox and southpaw, but he's very good off that lead side with the jab, the check hook, and the switch left kick to the head. He can even throw front kicks to your face, front kicks to the body. He's very lead side heavy, almost more lead side heavy than he is rear side heavy. And he also can grapple. He can wrestle. We saw him use that against Corey Sandhagen, but we also saw that Corey Sandhagen in that fight looked more prepared for the wrestling, grappling, and chain wrestling sequences than we've ever seen from him in his entire career. And I think that is a nod to Corey Sandhagen, but I also think at the same time, you have to nod or, tip your cap to Umar, because even with a Corey who was prepared, who was ready to get into scrambles, who was ready to stuff takedowns, he still was able to execute his game plan, and he was even able to outstrike Corey at certain parts of the fight. I do believe that in the championship rounds, the cardio of Merab probably shows through in this fight just like it did in all of his other fights, mainly in the Sean O'Malley fight. But I do think that the slickness of Umar Nurmagomedov is just going to be a little bit too much for Merab Dvalishvili. Like I said, we've seen vulnerabilities, we've seen him get hurt, we've seen him get rocked, and we've seen him be able to survive. But when's the last time you've seen him get hurt by a guy who had just as good grappling and takedowns and takedown defense as striking? And I think that's the biggest difference here is Umar can strike with you, Umar can grapple, and he almost would rather strike with you than wrestle, but he still can go to those areas if he has to. He can get takedowns, he can take your back, he can put the body triangle in. And he also is, like I said, more comfortable striking on the feet than just about any Nurmagomedov, because Said Nurmagomedov is not related to the Nurmagomedov family that we, know throughout the UFC. And in this fight, I could see Merab winning those championship rounds after losing the first 3. Maybe it's like first 2 rounds, Umar's out striking him. He's landing the check hook. He's landing those front kicks. He's catching him with head kicks. He hurts him, but Merab's able to hold on. Merab kind of slows him down and might be able to win this fight on a decision, because I do think the fighter who probably pushes a higher pace in the championship rounds is going to be Merab, and I think he could do that against anybody in the bantamweight division. But I also feel like he has so many vulnerabilities to that left side, left hooks. The left hook is always a big problem, and that would pretty much be on his right side, not his left side. But in this fight, I almost feel like the lead head kicks of Umar are going to catch Merab off kilter and get him hurt and probably get him finished. Because against Umar, it's a guy who can hurt you, and he has the grappling chops to be able to stuff takedowns if you push forward when you're hurt. He can stuff takedowns. He can go for his own takedowns, and he has good submissions as well. I wouldn't be surprised if Umar hurt Merab with a lead head kick, Merab shot, and then got caught in a guillotine, but I do think a guillotine is a terrible situation against a guy like Merab, because if you don't get that submission, he's going to wind up on top, and he's going to throw a lot of volume on the ground, he's going to throw a lot of ground and pound, and he's going to look for a lot of submissions. And whether it's, on the top landing ground and pound to have you give up your back and go for a rear naked choke, or he can just pound away on you until you quit. Merab is the master of making people quit and making people miserable. He is quite literally a machine, and like I said, lives up to his nickname. But I do think the sharpness on the feet is going to be too much. And yeah, I thought that Sean O'Malley striking was going to be too much. And yeah, I thought Peter Yan striking was going to be too much. But this is the first guy that we've really seen Merab face who has a well-rounded striking game, who's not primarily a kickboxer, who's not primarily a boxer. He can mix it up in all areas. He is very quick, very patient, and very technical, but he also has good grappling in his own right, good footwork, good movement, good takedowns of his own, good ability to win scrambles. And I don't think you want to get into a 25-minute wrestling match with Merab, because you're probably not going to win that no matter who you are. But I do think that the slickness and the sharpness of Umar on the feet is going to get Merab caught. And I actually think it's going to be with a lead head kick. I think that left head kick is going to catch Merab, and I think it's going to catch him off guard. And I think we're going to see a knockout win for Umar Nurmagomedov, where he wins the Bantamweight Championship. I'm going with New. I'm going with Umar Nurmagomedov to win this fight via a third-round knockout. I think he's going to catch him with that switch kick to the head, the left switch kick to the head. I think he's going to hurt him, catch him off guard, knock him down, and finish him off with some ground and pound. And I think we are going to see a new bantamweight champion in Umar Nurmagomedov at UFC 311. I just consistently see that left foot cracking Merab in the side of the head and knocking him down, and then either that finishing him off all in itself, or he hurts him so bad he jumps on him, lands a couple more ground and pound shots, and Merab gets put out. He's very durable, but he's also very susceptible to being hurt at the same time, and is just really good at surviving. I don't think he can survive against a well-rounded fighter like an Umar. So give me Umar Nurmagomedov, third round head kick KO to become the new UFC Bantamweight champion. All right, and now we are at the main event of the evening for the UFC Lightweight Championship between the champion in Islam Makhachev. Many people believe him to be the pound-for-pound #1 fighter in the UFC, taking on his toughest test to date inside the UFC in a rematch in Arman Tsarukyan, the man who he fought in his debut. I guess Arman fought Islam in his own debut and gave him one of his toughest tests and had one of the best fights in the UFC's lightweight division. I think that this fight, no two fights are going to be the same. So the last fight, it was back and forth. Islam got some beautiful Russian tie sweeps and landed in the mount. Arman was the first fighter to take down Islam Makhachev. We've seen Volkanovski get some takedowns since then in their first fight, and then he came back in the rematch, knocked him out with a head kick. Like I said, man, no two fights are the same. These are two of the best fighters in the lightweight division. You have Islam coming off that war with Dustin Poirier, and then locking up a Darce choke in the 5th round. But he had to get through some adversity, but his striking also looked very good in that fight. He landed some good 1-2s. He landed some good hooks, decent uppercuts, good strikes inside the clinch. And I think that when I look at the last fight between these two, if I'm going to compare the improvements of Arman to the improvements of Islam, I think the fighter who's gotten better since the last time they fought is the champion in Makhachev. I think that he has gotten better and at a faster rate than Arman Tsarukyan. Now, I think Tsarukyan's gotten better. He's fought some very good competition. He did lose that fight to Mateusz Gamrot. A lot of people thought that he deserved to win it. I ended up putting a bet on Gamrot by decision in that fight, so I'm not 100% mad because I did have a wager on it, but that's different. We've seen more vulnerabilities from Arman than we have from Islam. Even in Arman's last fight, he got caught in a guillotine in the 1st round and almost got submitted by Charles Oliveira. Makhachev, on the other hand, pretty much dominated Oliveira, dropped him with a hook, jumped on top of him, and then submitted him with an arm triangle. The fight between Arman and Charles Oliveira was a lot more competitive than the fight between Islam and Oliveira. But again, MMA math doesn't really work. But the one thing I think that will work is the fact that, like I said, no two fights are ever going to be the same. So there's going to be something different in this fight. Either Islam's striking is going to look way better than Tsarukyan's. Tsarukyan's striking is going to look a lot better. Maybe Islam gets taken down a few more times in this fight than we expect. Maybe Arman doesn't get any takedowns and Islam completely out-wrestles him. I think this fight is mainly going to turn into a striking matchup. And when I look at the improvements of both fighters, I think a lot of people on paper will look at Arman and think that he's the better striker. I beg to differ. I actually think that Islam is the better striker coming into this rematch. And I think that when we look at the improvements overall in the striking game, I think that if there was a gap in the last fight between the striking, I would say Arman was known as the better striker in their first matchup in his UFC debut. I think now I would almost classify Islam as making more improvements in the striking since the last time that they fought. I mean, we've seen Arman Tsarukyan get dropped or rocked and wobbled by Joaquim Silva, and then he came back and finished him off with ground and pound. But he got rocked. He got rocked bad in that fight. We've seen him get hit. We've seen him get hurt, in certain situations, but he's been able to come back. I think that in this fight, we're going to see a finish. I know a lot of people probably expect it to go to a decision. It's going to be this high-level, back-and-forth fight between two of the best in the division. I think that Islam is going to put out Arman Tsarukyan in this fight. There, I said it. Now, would I be surprised if Islam got knocked out by Tsarukyan? I would be, but we have seen Islam Makhachev be put out before. He got put out by Adriano Martins, his only loss in his professional MMA career, and that was inside the UFC, and it was a clean knockout. He dropped him with that little check hook, hurt him bad, rocked him, jumped on him with one more shot, and put him out. I do think that Arman has the power and the technical skills to crack Islam on the chin with a big shot and hurt him. I think that that is a possibility. But like I said, between the last fight and now, I think the fighter who has made the better improvements, who has become a more well-rounded mixed martial artist, who has shored up a lot of the holes in their game, is probably going to be Islam Makhachev. And the first fight was very close, but we knew that Islam probably did enough to win it. I think in this fight, we're going to see not a ton of wrestling. It's going to mainly play out as a striking fight for however long it lasts. And I do think that Makhachev is going to find a shot that puts out Arman Tsarukyan. So I am going to go and still. I'm going to go and still the UFC lightweight champion. I'm going to pick Islam Makhachev. This might be the first time I picked him on my podcast. I've never been the biggest fan of Islam. I've never been the biggest fan of him, but eventually you just got to tell it like it is. And I think it would be crazy if Tsarukyan knocked him out, but I could see it happening because, like I said, no two fights are the same. But I do think Islam has made more improvements since the last time that they fought, and I think that he is going to be improving. I think that he's improved his striking at a more rapid rate than Arman, and I don't think we're going to see a whole lot of wrestling. I think this is mainly going to be a kickboxing match, and I'm going to go Islam Makhachev to win this fight via a 4th-round knockout. I think he knocks out Arman Tsarukyan. I don't know what it's going to be with. I could see it being with a right hand, or, he's got a very good left hand, from southpaw. So I think it could be that straight left right down the middle. As Arman crashes the pocket, he might land that check hook and just bang him right down the middle with that straight punch. I think it could be a head kick as well, but I don't want to go back-to-back head kick KOs in the co-main and the main event. So I'm going to say he catches him with a... I'm going to say he just catches him with a straight left. Like, they're fighting, they're in the middle, boom, drops him with a straight left, jumps on him, and does enough to finish him off. I like Islam by knockout in this one. A lot of people are always going to be eager to jump on that submission, and I think it's live. Even in a grappling scenario where, Tsarukyan doesn't get rocked, I think Islam can probably submit him, whether it's a Darce choke, whether it's a guillotine. We've seen vulnerabilities, especially in the Charles Oliveira fight, where Arman can leave his neck out there to be caught in submissions, but he's got very good defense. But I see a knockout finishing this fight off and capping off the main event of UFC 311. I am going to go with, and still, the UFC lightweight champion, Islam Makhachev, to defeat Arman Tsarukyan via a 4th-round knockout. I think he's going to catch him with a straight punch right down the middle, drop him, jump on him, and finish him off. Give me and still, give me Makhachev to retain the championship here. All right, that's going to be it for my preview, predictions, and breakdown for UFC 311. We covered the whole card, top to bottom. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and smash the notification bell with an upward elbow into a downward elbow on the other side to put it in check. And don't forget to catch all of my future uploads from the premier mixed martial arts and pro wrestling channel on YouTube. I'm your host, Double M. Let's continue the momentum in 2025. Let's cash these tickets and let's make some money at UFC 311 this weekend.